What have the All Blacks learned from their victory over South Africa in the Rugby Championship? And in fact, I can even extrapolate that out to what have the All Blacks learned over the opening 2 rounds of the Rugby Championship, because it was a brilliant performance in the opening 20 minutes and a great victory against the Springboks. And I think at the start of this World Cup year, the start of the year for them anyway, because they've only just started playing games, there are a lot of positives that they are heading in the right direction. So I'm just going to go through a few things in this video that stand out to me. But as always, make sure you drop a comment down below. Let me know what has impressed you the most with the All Blacks at the moment, and also maybe what areas they need to improve on. There's one point for me that I will mention at the end of the video. Like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get into it. So the first thing that I wrote down when I was watching the game at the weekend in big block capitals was forwards. I think that New Zealand pack has been brilliant in the opening 2 rounds of the Rugby Championship. If you look at the game against the Springboks and that opening 20 minutes, and also basically the entire 80 minutes, or certainly the opening 40 at least, against Argentina the week before, their forward pack has physically been brilliant. They've got them on the front foot and they've got them over the gain line. And in fact, a real part of that, and an area that I think is probably the most pleasing if I was an All Blacks fan, would be the set piece. Because I think Lomax and De Groot, in terms of props, have been really, really good. In particular, actually, in that first half against South Africa, I thought South Africa started to look more dangerous in the scrum, as we often think they would be later on into the second half as the game went on. So maybe the depth in New Zealand isn't quite where it is of maybe, for example, the Springboks at the moment. But in terms of starting props, I thought the set piece, the scrum, looked absolutely solid in that first half. And that is a great thing to see, because actually that good platform that they've had in the opening 20 minutes against the Boks and in the first 40 against Argentina has given us a really good indication of what this New Zealand backline can do. And they're probably not a set of backs, if we look at the All Blacks, that are as heralded and as feared as some previous iterations, some of the great players we've seen wear that jersey. But actually, in part, if we start to look at it now, is it because they haven't been playing with quite the same sort of forward pack, quite the same sort of dominance that maybe those teams were? I think the last couple of weeks we have seen that this New Zealand backline, give them that front foot ball. If they get collision dominance and physically that forward pack can do what we've seen them do in the opening 2 rounds of the competition, then that backline is one to be feared as well. That's probably actually my biggest takeaway from the All Blacks. I think the forwards look much, much improved, and in particular that scrum set piece is absolutely key when it comes to a World Cup. Not just because actually of the front foot ball it gets you, but also if you're in a tight match, if you're in a knockout game, so often it is that set piece, it's the driving maul, which actually teams in Europe revert to a lot when games get tight. You see it in Europe quite a lot, less so in Super Rugby. I think the Crusaders probably do it more. But if you can do that in knockout rugby, if you have a forward pack that is solid enough to be able to do that, then that can be the difference between getting you over the line, I think, rather than a forward pack that ultimately crumbles. So I've been really impressed with the forwards. There's other names we could mention as well. I mean, Scott Barrett, I think, has been absolutely excellent. Frizzell, understandably getting a lot of plaudits because he looks like he's making that 6 jersey his own. I mean, would hate to have been Willie LaRue in that position, having to try and tackle him as he just bashed him out of the way to score that try. So forwards for New Zealand, in my opinion, big, big tick. The second point I want to get onto, and this is potentially going to be a little bit more contentious, and it's Beauden Barrett at 15, because I think against the Springboks, we saw a pretty good case study for why Barrett at 15 makes a lot of sense. And I know there's a lot of All Blacks fans that want to see Will Jordan there, they want to see Stevenson there. They have different options, and they felt for a while that maybe Barrett isn't the guy to be wearing the 15 jersey. But we saw why it works against South Africa, and mainly I think it's for 2 things. It's first of all, he's a second playmaker who can step in as first receiver, he can distribute, he's played enough 10 that he's very comfortable there. And the second thing was his kicking game, and his kicking game against South Africa was excellent. I've got a couple of screenshots that I just wanted to show you, just a few grabs. The first one is where he steps in at first receiver here and he ends up throwing the wide pass over to Will Jordan. I'm pretty sure that's where he kind of shrugs off the tackle of Willie LaRue, bursts back inside and releases Aaron Smith. And then the second one was another opportunity and another try that was created. He just switched the emphasis of the attack in the 22, went back towards the short side. This is where we saw him both at first receiver and then also the kicking game as well, because he put a little dink over the top, and again Will Jordan, even though he almost fumbled it, was able to dab down. So 2 examples there, but I was watching that game and all of a sudden I just thought, it makes sense. You can see tactically why this would work really well. And also, if you've got someone like Will Jordan who can play 15, but actually, if you stick him on the wing, you've essentially got another fullback. You've got someone who's really good in the air because, as has been pretty well documented, I saw they spoke about it on the breakdown a lot at the weekend, or not necessarily at the weekend. I saw it on YouTube, whenever that was, the show over there in New Zealand. They spoke a lot about the kicking game. If you've got someone like Will Jordan, that's a massive area of strength, and they targeted that against the Springboks, and that came up trumps for them, really. The only other thing I would say with Barrett at 15 is I wonder, we now know what he can do. Just before the World Cup, do you want to give Stevenson a go? Just to at least see what he brings to that jersey and see what options you have there. They do have a few warm-up games still to come, so maybe you want to wrap up the Rugby Championship, win that competition, and then give him a go after. But I just wondered whether we might see some rotation there, possibly in the rest of the team as well, as they look to find out some questions and wanting to know as much about this squad before they get to France. But for me, Barrett at 15, I know some people don't want to see him there. I'm sure it's still a big talking point. It worked very, very well against South Africa. You could see what he brings to that jersey. I mentioned the kicking game just there. I could have spoken more about that, but I actually was thinking about it, and it's more varied than that. It's not just the kicking game that has been good. It's been the fact that New Zealand have shown different elements to their game. They've scored tries from deep. They've had a forward pack that's got them over the gain line. They've had a kicking game that tactically is very, very good. They've had real moments of physical dominance in games as well. So I think it's more than just the kicking game. It's that variety in their play at the moment is so, so dangerous, because they've proven when they get it right how good they can be. We've seen so many different areas of their game, if I want to go back to the scrum or whatever we want to pick out, that have been real strong points in the opening 2 rounds of the season for them. And there'll be tougher challenges to come. I'm well aware of that. We're 2 games in for the All Blacks to what ultimately will come to a head in France in a few months' time. There will be tougher tests ahead, but I just like the variety in their game at the moment. I think that's going to be key to whatever team wins the World Cup, is being able to hurt teams in different ways and dominate different areas of the game. And so far, they have been able to do that. I did say I would finish on one, not even really a negative, work on, I suppose. And I guess it's linked to almost what I've spoken about already. We've seen so much good from the All Blacks, but we've also seen them drop off at times. And I think to a degree, that happens. For example, I don't think it's possible to play as well as they did in the opening 20 against the Springboks, certainly not against good opposition, for the full 80. But I still think there's been variety in their games against Argentina and against South Africa, where it's just peaked and troughed a little bit. As I say, you always expect that to a degree, but it's minimising those moments to be able to be as dominant as possible. So I still think the consistency is something they will be focusing on. But in my opinion, there's no doubt they are on the right track. We'll see how they keep improving and see how far they can go at the World Cup later this year. But I think the signs so far about them at least being able to launch a challenge. Look, they're on such a tough side of the draw. A lot of good teams are going to have to come up against, but they look in a good place at the moment for what they are building towards. Let me know if you agree with me in the comments section down below. If you can like the video as well and subscribe to the channel, and that just massively, massively helps. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.